Now we'll move to the next session, and for the next session, I would like to invite Seema Joshi, another P-Camp Ninja, who will be moderating the session with Kavitha Appaya on UX design. Over to you, Seema.
Thanks, Vibhor. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Kavitha Appaya. We all know that despite the best features, having all the latest technologies, putting in our best effort, often sometimes there can be a little more that customers are asking for. Until all of this translates into actually a delightful customer experience, there is more to be done. And today we actually have Kavitha, who is going to talk on a very interesting, on her take on a very interesting topic, where she is going to bring to us some very interesting pointers on user research, how it can be an underrated but key to a great customer experience. To share a little more about Kavitha, I'm actually very happy to introduce a very multifaceted personality that we have with us today. She is an engineer by training and has deep interest in human behavior and human interaction. I think that draws her into what she does. She's currently a senior design researcher at Pensaar Design. And not just that, she also has deep interest in fermentation science. Yeah, you heard me right, and basketball. So on a freer day, you could actually catch her at a basketball game or actually an analysis or tour of a winery or a brewery. But for today, we are going to pick her brains on how we can actually use UX research to drive great customer experiences. Welcome again, Kavitha, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Seema. So before I begin, I'll just say it's a good afternoon and it's really nice to be here. I think it's the best dressed I've been in the last 2 weeks. That was only because I thought they might, in the off chance that I appear on video, I might have to look presentable. So it's been a good start to the day already. Okay, so today what I'm going to be talking about is customer research and how it plays such a critical role in building the entire customer experience itself when it comes to products. And 3 things that I really want to touch on through these, through the rest of the minutes that I have are, so the 3 things that we're looking at are intention versus behavior, jobs to be done, and checking unconscious biases. And often what happens when products are built, and I know a lot of product managers are going to be sitting up in their seats, but so as a researcher, we often realize that it's often a solution first approach to products. And it's very, very important to look at it with a problem first approach, understanding what the real challenge is, what the real problem is really before you even start to think about what that solution could be for people. Which is why intention versus behavior, because we all know this, people often, and your customers, your users, they often speak in the form of intention. And it's very, very important to dig deeper, get through the layers and really understand what actual behavior is like. When we say jobs to be done, the jobs to be done is about understanding what people are doing today without your solution. So if your solution is not really meeting their needs, what else are they doing to make sure that need is met? And checking unconscious biases, I mean, we all know this. We often, without even realizing it, obviously, because it's unconscious, is we often go in thinking we know something already, but it's very, very important to go in with an open mind to really, truly understand what those needs are and really kind of get rid of some of the assumptions that are pre-existing. And to illustrate this, what I'm going to do is walk you through a case study. And when I say case study, it's a research that we've done. It's a financial product that we worked on, but the entire process started with us conducting research. It was very exploratory, and that's how it really began. So as you can see, what we were doing specifically was trying to understand how low-income customers, and these were especially migrants, that was the target segment that we were looking at, manage their personal finances. And this is a process. We conducted research across 4 cities with about 70 plus individuals, right? We use a variety of research techniques. As you can see, they're all on the screen. Contextual inquiries. We kind of shadowed people, followed them. We used game research techniques to also break down what people thought around their personal finances. I mean, if anybody asked you the question of the question about your personal finances, it's a very, very sensitive and hard topic to talk about. It's not easy to get people um, to kind of share those intimate details. So we had to come up, we had to be smart, we had to be innovative and come up with techniques that could actually help us break that barrier and allow people to have that conversation with us. So really getting to intention versus behavior, how do you do it? So we started off with, first of all, being there in person with them. And what we realized during research was we went in thinking people are going to tell us to get out or get lost, really, when we went and spoke to them about their personal finances. But interestingly enough, I mean, that's the first assumption these people broke for us. If we approached it right, which is we said we're trying to conduct some research, a lot of this research was done on the field. So we call it the wild safari method. So we're just kind of going out in the field in specific areas, low in migrant areas, and trying to understand these people. So we walked around and recruited people on the fly, but talking to them about what we wanted to do and saying, hey, we would just like to understand how you go about it, no personal details required. So we were there in person, and then we used game-based research. And game-based research really helped because it took the focus away from something as private as finances. And at the same time, it helped them interact with something. So it didn't. So it kind of broke that barrier down. What people were doing was they were enjoying the game, while at the same time they were able to answer questions for us, right? And making it visual, as you can see in the pictures, making it visual, having pictures to give them to uh, get them to look at. Because another thing we've realized is it's very intimidating when somebody comes and talks to you about a specific topic, especially if you're not doing much about it, right? So how do you overcome that? It was, if you had picture references to everyday objects, it was easier for people to talk through. So they literally gave us I mean, instead of asking people, tell us your money in, money out, we used pictures to be able to do that. And using those pictures, we were able to build that out for them without really asking that intimidating question of, tell us how you manage your money. What's your money out? What's your money in today? So um, also at the same time, to get to how do you really get to behaviors? So people often say a lot of things, but since we were there in person, we got to ask people questions like, okay, can you show us a little bit about how you save money? And people are doing interesting things. I mean, adults who had put aside pots of money in their house, hidden under their shelf somewhere. Then there were people who like most people had second accounts. So they were so scared, so they built like these virtual walls to their money because they were so scared they would spend their own money. They were moving money out to different accounts. Or we met this one girl who literally withdrew money from her account, put it in envelopes, and kept it in her mother's cabinet somewhere so she wouldn't touch her money. So those are very interesting things we saw, and we got to those kinds of behaviors only because we were there, only because we were asking people to show examples of what they were doing with their money. And along the way, what was interesting was we started to see similar patterns. Once we had spoken to about 8 or 9 people, we saw similar patterns. So we said, okay, these are things that we are assuming today. We're seeing patterns and we possibly are making assumptions. Let's test whether we're making the right assumptions or not, which is why prototype research came in. So we built very quick, rapid prototypes, went back to people, and these are around topics that we'd been hearing frequently. Went back and, using these prototypes, we were able to understand things like, again, further delve into money in, money out, how people made decisions when it came to saving money, and who in their ecosystem they turn to, which is a very, very important thing for us to understand again. because it's never really, I mean, you think the end customer or the end user is the only person using the product, but there are so many people influencing the decision that they make that it is very, very important for us to get to that place. So the next step is making sense of all of this, right? And this is really getting into the jobs to be done. What are people really trying to do? And what do we need to address? So making sense of all of this data. What we realized was, yes, everybody is managing money in and money out, but money is really supposed to give you joy. I mean, you getting your paycheck or your salary is, we all know it's such a great feeling, but somehow managing it just really beats the happiness out of money, right? The other thing is that even with so much financial help available out there, people don't turn to that. Why is it? They almost always turn to that uncle or that cha-cha that they want to get advice from, who's possibly managing his money much better than anybody else that he knows. So these people are mostly turning to them, asking them for advice. And the other thing was that people needed resilient strategies in an approachable environment. And if I can illustrate an example for this on the resilience strategies, see what we did along the way of research when we started out was we met amazing people. There was this one lady, if I can give you if I can tell you all a story about this one woman called Baby in Delhi that we met. She was a karigar. She didn't make too much money, but she was very, very comfortable, knew exactly where she was spending her money, how she was using it. So her monthly income was very sorted. So she, at least in her head, it was very sorted. Extremely confident woman. And we did something called longitudinal research. And this longitudinal research played such a big role in the work that we did, because some of these people that we spoke to in the first round of research, when we went back to them about a month later to go back and understand, in time, how things have changed, what are they doing, this lady Baby that we spoke to, who was so confident in the first round, we went back to her. The first thing she said to us when we met her was, she's like, abhi mujhe kuch mat pucho. She was like, please don't ask me anything. I can't think. I don't know what to say to you because my life has changed so drastically. My husband needs to have this major surgery. She's like, how can you even ask me to think about saving money right now, because I don't even have money, right? And that for us was a big, big revelation. We said, for people who are on that journey and have started to build that habit already, it's when life happens to them, and we know life happens to all of us, big shocks come in, we don't know how to deal with it, but it really threw them off. They couldn't even think about restarting that savings journey again, or at least putting it on hold and starting off on another day. It was like they just fallen off the bandwagon. They just said, no more savings anymore, because I can't think about it. What I'm doing right now is not coming to any, or is not any use, so I'm not going to do this. So it was very important to synthesize and um, get to the right insights itself, so we could define the problem we wanted to then solve, right? And as you can see, we had very clear personas and journey lines. And so the next step, and this is something that we do often with our clients, which is we co-create with them. So while co-creating with them, we said, okay, the next thing we want to do is build a product, because they wanted it to be scalable. They wanted it to be something that could reach a multitude of people. And really, it was focused on financial inclusion. How do we bring financial inclusion to this segment of people? So now getting into checking some of our unconscious biases. And how did we do this? So we started off building what we thought the product should look like based on everything that we had learned. So we conducted quick, rapid experiments. Of course, we created click-through prototypes for people to look at. And again, to illustrate, since I'm a researcher, I have a lot of stories from the field, so I'm going to share a lot of those. There's an organization in Bangalore which works with a lot of with a lot of migrants. So we were talking to this one lady who mostly spoke in Hindi, but she had learned English in school. So she was like, yeah, I can understand most of it. So I can go through your prototype. So she was looking through our prototype. She was reading, we had all of this there. She, at some point, as she was clicking through the prototype, suddenly she took this deep breath. She went, so like really let out this heavy sigh. And we noticed that she was doing that along several points when she was going through the journey itself. And again, if we hadn't been there with her and watched her go through the entire experience, we would have never caught on. She thought she went through the journey fairly well. But what we realized was when it, the task of reading, so English is not her first language, it was so hard for her to read the content that was on this on each of those screens, that there was so much mental energy that she was putting into reading it that it was exhausting for her, right? And we'd have never caught that at all and that's when we realized, we thought we had done this great job of putting this thing together, and suddenly this lady is just struggling to read through it to the point where it's exhausting her. So we said, okay, that's the first thing we need to fix. How do we make sure we minimize content and at the same time make it visual enough, simple enough for people to then use it? And that's how we eventually came down to building this. As you can see, heavily, it's changed drastically. It's a lot more visual in terms of how we are presenting our presenting information for people, and we're also making it very, very clear, very, very simple. And going back to those key points that we looked at, some of our insights that we had arrived at from our research, which was people need resilient strategies to be able to deal with life. People needed to be able to have the flexibility to not save and save when they wanted to. And another thing was that people often felt like saving money or investing their money somewhere felt like they were locking their money away and they would never have access to it when they needed it. Especially with this target segment, it was very, very important to have it available at all times. And which is why the final product was built keeping these key tenets in mind, which is individuals could pause their monthly savings at their convenience, the savings or the investment. So the investment is happening in the back end, but it was really about savings. So they could pause their monthly savings at their convenience. So, it gave individuals to adopt a financial product fearlessly. I think that's one of the biggest barriers that which stops people from doing anything itself. And the other thing was about being able to withdraw your money as in when you please it. So you have access to it at all times, no problem at all. So it was very, very critical to keep some of the key tenets in mind while building out the product itself. So summarizing what we spoke about through all of this, why customer research itself? It's about understanding real behavior over just intention. It's about understanding what jobs people are trying to get done, what are current workarounds they have, what are certain hacks they're using to do what your product or your services today possibly not allowing them to do. And of course, check unconscious behaviors itself, which is, and we've used behavioral experimentation to be able to check all of those, to arrive at all of those behaviors itself and check our biases. Thank you.
Cool, Kavitha, that was very, very interesting. In fact, I think the case study approach and those, useful sharing of experiences along the way, I think at least helped me, and I'm sure, our audience to kind of empathize with the topic much more in a contextualized manner. I think you were, a very interesting way for all of this to come away was it's about personas, yes, but it is also about continuous empathy, not empathy at one given point or an event in time. And I think the subtle and very important thing often about, the day in a life, is it about a day in a life, week in a life, month in a life, and year in a life, and they can all just open different problems and opportunities. So thank you for kind of packing it in such a easy to understand manner. We'll quickly get to questions because they're pouring in real fast. Um, I think one question that we have from the audience is about if it's a low cost or a low turnaround scenario from a time perspective, what are some research tips that you could share with the team so that it doesn't get left off, but there's something quick they can still do, which is often a common scenario.
Yeah. So Seema, in a yes, in a low cost, quick turnaround scenario, really, I mean, we've seen talking to as few people as 4 or 5, even if time constraints are there, 4 to 5 people can give you can at least give you a start. It's a good start to understand how people are thinking with the right target segment. Another very interesting way to do it is through rapid experimentation, which is if you have a hypothesis, you can recreate this, you can create an experiment that does not require much at all. It would require, it's as simple as sending out an email to test certain behaviors. It's about as simple as building basic code to be able to test something. So that if you send out to the right target segment in no less than 2 to 3 days, you should be able to get to
Sure. Yeah. So I think
some
you're
level of
suggesting,
input.
sure. Yeah. Use some hypothesis, validate it, iterate it, and then see where you go with that.
Yes.
Very useful, very useful. We'll go to the next one. I think there's a question on what are some of the prototyping tools that you could recommend as people are, quickly trying to kind of get their hands through this iterative way of building products and getting feedback. And anything, any specific tools that are your favorites or that folks could use?
Sorry, can you repeat that again, Seema? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Any tools? Yeah, any tools for prototyping that you recommend where people can do quick or rapid?
Yes.
Yeah.
So some of our favorite ones are storyboarding technique. There's something called, what we call the storyboarding technique. So really, it's a frame of 6 boxes where you start to. It starts out with being able to just describe your customer, the problem he's trying to solve, or the problem he's going through. Then your solution itself in about 3 frames, and finally how your solution meets the outcome or solves the problem itself for the user. So it's really telling the story of what your solution will do, but also making sure you're defining the right problem you're trying to solve. So that's a great prototyping technique. We've used that to be able to have conversations with customers itself, with all stakeholders involved in the process itself. Another prototyping technique, I mean, something that we've used is Envision, which has definitely helped us be able to showcase our solution to users and test with users.
Sure. No, I think that is useful. I think another challenge or tension often people face is that while in some cases there may not be the luxury for different reasons to do a deep research, and in some cases you may be able to do that, but at the same time there are rapidly running development streams or products that are being shipped. So how do you what would be your tips to kind of integrate user research into product development? I mean, it's hard to kind of stop it, but it's also not possible to leave it. So any tips that you have around that that folks could use?
Okay, that's so. So I would say, I mean, UX research is supposed to be embedded into the product development phase, its entire product development phase. I think it's critical to have that as much as people think. And that's the sad part, right? Research, somehow everyone thinks, okay, we don't have the time, and the compromise is we don't do the research, we just get into building the product. But if it's all about the solution, if the focus is on the solution, what problem are you really trying to solve at the end of the day? And if you don't have that right, your outcome itself is never going to meet the right goal. So I truly think research has to be embedded into the entire product development phase, even if it is iterative, even if it comes in at different cycles or different points in the product development phase, but it needs to be there every step of the way.
Sure. And I think your
and you
tip
can
from
do
the
interesting
previous
things.
yeah. And I think some of the tips that you shared about being iterative perhaps is a cue to how you can start slowly at least building it on. Yeah, I think this is an interesting one, and we're going to take this on. I think we, in the audience, we of course have a lot of product practitioners, product managers, UX folks, technologists, and so forth. There's one very interesting question, and it'll be kind of good to see what you have to say about it. Saying that. There are product heads and managers. I mean, how seriously do they take the UX surveys and output, or is there always like a common tension between product and UX teams? So that is the question that we've got. You could take that on, or if I think this is your opportunity. If there's one pet peeve that you have against all of us product managers that you think you want to give us throw that cushion on our head and give us a beating, I think this is your chance. Tell us one thing we as product managers should do differently to give UX and CX the place it needs.
All right. I think if it was one thing that anybody could do differently is what product managers can do differently is don't tell your designers or UX researchers how to do something. Please communicate the what that you're trying to do or achieve. And I think it's important to give the teams the freedom to be able to find the right way to build that solution or design that solution, or researchers to go out and understand what the challenge is. So communicate the what versus the how, really. Yeah. If that.
Yeah. No, that is interesting, and I think very, very useful often. All right, I think we'll take a couple of other ones quickly. There's one I think, and I'm sure it comes up often again, is in line with the previous conversation, saying in a B2B and a B2C, there may be different opportunities and ways to do. If there are any one or two tips that you would suggest that when you're typically working with B2B customers, I think your example kind of walked us through the B2C, but if there are any tips you want to share for an enterprise product that people can keep in mind as they look at embedding UX into building great products.
Okay.
Think of it as one persona or many personas in one workflow. Now that's like a classic that oftentimes people will face, right?
Yeah.
Every customer thinks that my problem is the biggest or my issue is the biggest, but finally they're all still going to kind of consume it through one feature in a certain way.
Yes. So it's a hard question to answer, really, Seema, because I think for us, the way we look at it, whether it's B2B or B2C, I mean, I agree they're different, but they're not really, because there are as many stakeholders in that ecosystem, even with a B2C product, right? And of course, B2B, the way we typically look at it is there's multiple stakeholders and there are multiple personas under that. So how do we solve for that? But really, in a B2C product too, it's very, very critical to understand that the ecosystem and the stakeholders, because they have such a big influence on how your end customer is going to use that product. And it's a classic example of, say, your Amazon, your consumer could be the child wanting something, wanting to buy something on, wanting to eat something, but the shopper really is the parent, right? And then you have the vendor who's trying to sell all of that on this platform. So even though it's a B2C product, there's still so many other people involved in that. So the only thing with B2B, I think often what happens is the end user really is once removed, which becomes the challenge, because often the decision makers are more higher up in the organization, but at the end of the day, it's the rest of the organization using the product, so might not always be the right fit. So I think it's very, very important to understand what the needs of all the people under the organization. So it's not just one person making that decision, but it needs to trickle down before building the product.
Sure. So I think you're telling us stick to the basics and do what needs to be done, and it will be taken care of. Thank you. That is useful. I think we have an interesting question. We have some folks from the UX community also. We actually have someone who is a UX researcher and a big advocate of UX research from India. That's great. So I think the question here is that, are there any thoughts about remote UX research? And how do you kind of any tips on that? Or
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of thoughts about remote UX research. We also see how it's playing such a big role right now, especially in this time. I think, and I think it's a great way to be able to achieve scale and cut costs. I mean, I cannot stress on the importance of being on the field and being able to see things for what it is. I think that's something that I'll always stand by. But I understand the value of remote research too. But it's and there's very, very interesting ways of doing it, right? It's I mean, we've done work in the sense that we've done remote interviews, followed it up with diary studies of sorts to be able to understand behavior itself and understand what people do, and then again followed it up with interviews again to understand why people are doing what they're doing. And there's so many tools out there today that will help you do that. But I mean, nothing like it, because it also helps you go global. If cost is a problem, if time is a problem, it helps you kind of tick all those boxes off easily.
Sure. No, thanks for that. I think we have one minute to go, and what I'm perhaps going to do is, do a rapid fire round. There are, of course, no right questions or wrong questions, but we'll just quickly pick on your brain, given it's Friday afternoon, and we'll have some fun. So feel free to pick your answers. We have 3 or 4 quick ones on the rapid fire. What would you say, research first or customers first?
I would say the same thing, but customer research first, because if you have to understand the customer, I guess research first. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Iterative or radical?
Iterative.
All right. And research for good design or good research for design?
Good research for design.
Super. Cool, Kavitha. That was it was fun to host you and to have you. I think thanks for sharing a lot of nuggets and stories with us. I'm sure we will have a lot of questions that are yet to be answered, either in forms of follow-up sessions or some other means. But thank you so much. I think it was a power dose of UX, and we will remember your little pen on the head beating for us PMs. We will make room for UX and make it part of what we do and take to customers. Thank you so much. Vibhor,
Thank you, Seema.
over to you.
Thank you for making it fun, being a great moderator. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you, Kavitha. It was a great fun session for all of us. And however, we planned for some 10 minutes break, but looks like if we take break now, we will, the session, following session will get extended further. So I'm taking a break off. So there is no break in the session. Maybe we can utilize it in some other way. The next session we go along with Prasad Velagaredi, who is with PayPal, another PCamp Ninja, and is going to moderate a session with Dheeraj Prasad, who is going to share a quick 30 learnings in next 30 minutes. So
can I just, sorry, Vibhor, can I just add?
Sure.
Sorry, just wanted to add, because I heard a lot of interesting questions about research and remote research, but in fact, as Pensaar itself is doing something around remote research. We're setting up something in the next couple of weeks where we'll be kind of taking people through the process itself. We're just starting to initially put stuff out on LinkedIn. So if anything, people can always follow us and join. It's an open process. There's no anybody can be a part of it if you want to learn. So just wanted to add that. Sorry.
No issue. Thank you, Kavitha. I think that's going to be a great project. And guys, for all of you, if you have any questions, the speakers, you can tag them. You can, take these questions on Twitter. You can share your opinion about what Kavitha has said or what Malti or Ram has presented on Twitter, on LinkedIn, using the India Productified hashtag, and we'll keep on reviewing those.